5 blockbusters that will eat your brain. Night of the Living Dead. Considered by many to be the quintessential OG zombie horror film, this gritty black and white features a number of undead tropes still used in contemporary mythos, from the mode of disease transmission to the monster's one Achilles heel, head trauma. After a space probe is terminated by NASA, scientists discover startling mutations they attribute to the satellite's radioactive emissions, corpses reanimating and cannibalizing the living. Emergency orders instruct residents to burn their dead in the streets. Private citizens are organized into volunteer militias to perform search and destroy operations. The now stereotypically slow-moving ghouls gradually overtake the homestead in which the protagonists are sheltering, picking them off one by one from outside and inside the house. Low on gore and high on tension, and reasonably fast-paced, with a reverse redemption arc for the hero who starts strong but ultimately forfeits the morality with which he begins his journey into night, the movie has its moments, despite the disadvantage of having been rendered somewhat predictable by its derivatives. Fraught with boilerplate misogyny that some may understandably find intolerable, and caricatured violence that feels clunky and sluggish, this antiquated slice of cinema nevertheless deserves recognition for its contribution to modern zombie folklore, its then subversive social commentary, and its dark twist at the end. Warm Bodies. Nicholas Hoult of About a Boy fame stars as anomalously inquisitive, introspective zombie R, the Romeo and Isaac Marions incandescent retelling of the Bard's box office hit that shook the groundlings in the pit and made shudder the boards. When R goes office space on his mindless grind of killing, binging on brains, and shuffling around, it sparks nonconformity in others like himself that spreads like a reverse contagion, exhuming his sleepwalking cannibal community and disproving rigidly held beliefs about the flesh-eating members of society that humanity has sworn to exterminate. Julie, the Juliet of the piece, is the first to discover this unprecedented development when R rescues her after her squad is outnumbered. The film centers as much on their efforts to communicate with each other, with the undead, and with the militarized survivors of a plague in progress, as it does on their heart-pounding adventure. It is not the post-apocalyptic, action-packed nature of the narrative, but rather the profundity of its quiet moments that gives this movie a pulse. Perhaps as an ode to its Shakespearean origins, the hero's soliloquizing guides us through a rich labyrinth of unlived experiences. This film adaptation is well worth the watch, and it's an even better read. In the Flesh. BBC fans, you won't want to miss this one. This gorgeously morbid series centers on partially deceased syndrome sufferer Kieran Walker and his post-resurrection odyssey, beleaguered by political corruption, medical malfeasance, rampant discrimination, denialism, and final deaths. After a harrowing escape from his own grave and incomplete rehabilitation, Kieran returns home from the treatment facility to a family that is still reeling from his death and struggling to accept him in his undead state, and a town that has embraced segregationist sentiments and condemned all rotters for what they've done under the influence of their condition. Reunited with a sister who has since joined a volunteer militia dedicated to hunting zombies during the Rising, and a lover who died in an IED explosion overseas, Kieran takes refuge in new relationships with radical self-love queen Amy Dyer and soon-to-be reformed cult leader Simon, who renounces his discipleship to the undead prophet in order to save his soulmate. This slow-burn masterpiece of 100 thought-provoking analogies has just one fatal flaw: its untimely cancellation. Train to Busan. If you like subtitles, stick around. This Korean chaos nightmare run is playing for keeps. Don't be fooled by its leisurely opening. The film picks up speed like a bullet train and rides the momentum all the way to its tragic close, with just enough breathing room staggered throughout to prevent the viewer becoming immune. A predominantly single-setting story with largely encapsulated world-building, the screenwriters leave no opportunity unturned to rattle the narrative off its hinges, with contortionist apex predator zombies that introduce an element of body horror to an already explosive, deceptively simple plot involving a young father and his small daughter whose travel plans are thwarted by a national crisis. With the entire region thrown into a state of emergency, reaching safety becomes the singular priority of each and every passenger, some with more empathy and integrity than others. That said, if you thought this was an ordinary one-track, emotionally uncomplicated graphic thriller, think again. The Last of Us. Last but certainly not least, game becomes cinema in this stark dystopian narrative that is as much a trek through character interior as it is through wastelands, ghost towns, city ruins, and outposts. When traumatized tough guy Joel meets even tougher teenage soldier in training Ellie, survival takes a backseat to saving the remainder of mankind from a fungal contagion with a hive mind of its own. But life, even in a post-apocalyptic hellscape, never happens in straight lines. Detours have to be taken, risks have to be reckoned with, unthinkable compromises must be considered, and impossible choices made, while the fates of the world and all the heroes hold dear teeter on the edge of a knife. Far beyond world building worthy of its genre, this epic fable of mind over man, hope and endurance versus mere existence chronicles the catastrophic labors of the human psyche when desperate love and unrecoverable losses collide with something bigger than the self.